Oligarchs and the minimum wage, the TikTok timeline. What will Trump do? And what about all those drones that were in the skies? How one airport is now reacting. That's Topping the Hill on NewsNation tonight.
I know that this is an important priority of you, and solar power. Sorry, that's okay.
Almost saved by the bell.
That was the fossil fuel industry.
All right, so a little bit of levity there in the midst of major change. Money and power, China's big app, and the process to bring home hostages, all on full display in D.C. and on the world stage today. Hello, good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. The current president slamming what he views as oligarchs in his goodbye Oval Office address. And today, the incoming president's main money man testifying in his confirmation hearing. Scott Bessent touting a potential quote-unquote new economic golden age, shooting down a possible increase in the federal minimum wage, and telling Democratic senators, we are in a race with China.
Just so we can frame this for everyone in the room, China will build 100 new coal plants this year. There is not a clean energy race. There is an energy race.
All right. Speaking of, despite all the warnings of TikTok potentially being a spy tool, a new rallying cry in Washington to try to save the app. NewsNation is told TikTok's CEO will be at Monday's presidential inauguration. And efforts are continuing by lawmakers, both sides of the aisle, to delay the app going dark on Sunday.
Senator Booker and I are asking President Biden to exercise his authority in order to extend the deadline by 90 days. We're willing to work with President-elect Trump and try to extend that deadline as well.
Also tonight, a live look in Israel. It is 1 a.m. there, and after sunrise, that country's cabinet is expected to vote on the hostage and ceasefire deal with the foreign terrorist organization Hamas. So what we are witnessing right now is the final transition. No matter what side of the political aisle you might be on, no matter what personal beliefs you might hold, this moment encapsulates change. A White House that now views billionaire wealth as bad. That changes in 4 days. A White House that now backs the TikTok ban. That changes on Monday as well. A White House that for more than a year tried to negotiate a peace deal with the soon-to-be commander-in-chief vowing hell to pay if that doesn't happen immediately. We begin tonight here on the Hill with Mick Mulvaney, former chief of staff in the first Trump administration, NewsNation contributor, and Kelly Meyer, NewsNation Washington correspondent. Hello to you both. Thanks for being here. This is a very unique, interesting...
It's a cool time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a cool time here in Washington.
It's a uniquely American thing because we're one of the rare countries
transitions.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. You've run several federal agencies. You've been on the job day one, White House chief of staff. Take me behind the scenes. What's happening right now at this moment?
In the Biden administration or in the incoming Trump administration? Because there's two different answers. So the stories I'm hearing out of the Biden administration is actually that they're still working, which stuns me because ordinarily at the end of a term when you're getting ready to turn over to the other party, and look, how did the Clinton team spend their time? They took all the W's off the keyboards, if you remember that, in the closing days. But everybody I've talked to in this town says that they've got the message from the boss to run through the tape, and they're still working. So hooray for them. The new folks can't wait to get in. Now, there's a lot of stuff to happen between now and Monday. There's a lot of parties this weekend, parties to the point where you get tired of them. And then Monday, of course, it's supposed to be like 47 degrees below zero in this town.
It's going to be freezing.
That's going to be miserable. But there's an excitement of we finally get to start on Monday. I heard last night at dinner that there might be as many as 100 executive orders. They got about 90 some ready, and they're trying to figure out a couple more so they can unload 100 executive orders on the first day.
I'm looking at Scott Bessent today, the likely Treasury Secretary, talk about a new economic golden age. You ran the budget, so you know a little bit behind the numbers there. But here's what I'm picking up on. Ron DeSantis played golf with Donald Trump the other day. And DeSantis said that Trump told him inflation, it was a big deal, but it was immigration that got me elected. I'm seeing Kevin Warsh, who might be the next Fed chair, probably the betting favorite, in the Wall Street Journal today saying the Fed can't pin inflation on Trump. Is there a little sort of walking away here from that, even though I hear Scott Bessent talking about this potential golden age?
Look, the American economy is the greatest economy in the world, and it's always got the potential to have a golden age. It gets harder and harder to do that when you have $36 trillion in debt and the threat of inflation. Yes, the inflation numbers that came out in the last couple of days were better. They're still not good. They're still at around 2%, but they're better, but they're not finished. And the elements that created inflation, which is that building spending too much money generally, are still there. If you get inflation in April, Trump can blame that on Biden.
Okay.
You get inflation this time next year, it gets really hard to do that.
TikTok, 170 million Americans, basically half the country, Kelly, have the app on their phone, and now there's this last-ditch effort to save it.
And people are watching this closely, and you talk about President Biden working up until running through the tape, but this is one thing that he's saying, or at least White House officials telling me, that he's leaving to Trump. They say that they agree that this should be under American ownership, but because this is happening over the holiday weekend and going into the new administration, they said it's up to Trump what he decides here. But we also have the Supreme Court first coming up tomorrow. We'll see what they do. And then, as you said, we have TikTok CEO on the stage at Inauguration. We confirmed who else is going to be on that stage? Elon Musk. They've also talked about that being bought by him as well. So will there be conversations happening on stage then? We have to wait and see how this plays out, but we know that Trump has said a lot of people elected him that were TikTok users. He's talked to the kids that supported him on TikTok. So
he's also been on both sides of this issue, right?
Previously, he was one of the
and
first
a lot of folks in his team
and it's one of those,
were for the ban or divest.
It's one of those unique topics in this town that doesn't fall neatly into Republican lines. You had Senator Mark Wayne Mullen on here last night talking about what a national security threat TikTok was. He is not the only Republican.
Michael Waltz, the national security advisor.
That's exactly right. What I don't understand, we saw the senator say that they want the president to use his authority to stop the ban.
We're going to get into that.
That's not how it works. The presidents don't get to undo what the courts say, so I'll be curious to see how that plays out.
See you later in the show.
You got it.
Appreciate it. Speaking of, less than 3 days until TikTok could be banned in the U.S. As we await for the Supreme Court's decision that Mick just referenced and Kelly just referenced, President-elect Trump is also taking matters potentially into his own hands, considering an executive order hoping to, quote, save TikTok.
I have a warm spot in my heart for TikTok because I won youth by 34 points. And there are those that say that TikTok has something to do with that.
Joining me now, Jesse Weber, NewsNation legal contributor, host of the Law and Crime Network. Jesse, so walk me through this, and hello, by the way. There was a law, a bipartisan law, signed by Congress, passed by the current president. The deadline is basically the 19th. And we're talking about an executive order. Executive orders don't trump laws, no pun intended. How would this work?
So stay with me on this legal journey. Okay. So first, the idea is the Supreme Court, right? The Supreme Court may issue a decision tomorrow. It looks like they're going to uphold the law. They might actually rule on whether to pause the law. Seems unlikely because during oral arguments, they didn't really talk about that. So then you wonder what's next. Well, President Biden, under this law, can actually put a pause in for 90 days if he says there's significant progress in the sale of the company. That's not really happening. Put that to the side. So what does Trump do? Trump has two options here. One, he can get into office and say, you know what, I think TikTok's in compliance with the law. It's shaky. I don't really think they are. And that's probably going to be a legal challenge. Then the executive order. By law, executive orders, they have, the same kind of actual practical effect as a real law. But when you have a conflict between an executive law order and a congressional law, usually the standard would say congressional law trumps that. And now he could say, well, wait a minute. I think what this law that was passed by Congress is unconstitutional. I think my executive order trumps that. This will be challenged in the courts. What may happen if there is a legal challenge, you would say there's a legal challenge. We're also asking for the court to stay the imposition of the ban as we work through this legal issues, and it buys TikTok more time. I know that he wants to, I know it seems that he wants TikTok to stay, but right now it doesn't seem like he has the legal weaponry to make that happen.
It is on this phone. I bet you it's on Jesse's phone, and it's on the phone of about half the folks in this country. And there's a lot at stake here with whatever happens here.
Not on my phone.
Nick Mulvaney's and Kelly Meyer's phone as well. Jesse Weber, thank you very much.
I don't believe it. I think he's got dancing videos, and he just doesn't want to share it. That's what I think.
We'll leave it there. Thank you, Jesse. Appreciate it. Jesse Weber, NewsNation legal contributor. All right, over now to the Middle East, where it is 1 o'clock in the morning in Israel. And hours from now, Israel's cabinet is scheduled to vote on the ceasefire and hostage deal with Hamas, after Israel says Hamas created, quote, a last-minute crisis. The White House says, quote, all systems are a go right now. and the deal is in fact on track. Now, it is a bittersweet moment for hostage families hoping to be reunited with their loved ones. I spoke with one family whose son was serving in the IDF and was killed by Hamas after being taken hostage.
We're incredibly thankful. I mean, we don't take it for granted. It's been a lot of hard work for a lot of good people, and we're very thrilled that we reached this moment, but it's not over until it's over.
Joining me now is Noah Tishby. She was the former Israeli special envoy for combating anti-Semitism. Also the author of the book, Israel, A Simple Guide to the Most Misunderstood Country on Earth. Noah, it's always nice to speak with you. Thanks for being back with us here on the Hill. I guess among the many big questions here is, do you think Hamas ends up living up to this deal and it's seen all the way to the end?
We can never trust a terrorist organization like Hamas. That's first and foremost. So until it happens, I'm not going to believe this, and I'm sure a lot of people feel the same. We are 467 days after the start of this war that Israel didn't want, but had to win. 98 hostages are still held in captivity, and it looks like we might get back 33 of them within the next 42 days. But it looks like Hamas has put in final stones and final hindrances within this deal. Again, not surprising at all. I know that the cabinet is going to get together tomorrow and vote on the deal. It seems like they're going to pass. This deal is going to pass, and it is going to go through, hopefully sooner rather than later. This is all Hamas is doing, obviously, and this deal should have happened a long time ago. Israel's been saying from the beginning, return the hostages and surrender, and we can have that ceasefire that people in America are calling for.
So this is obviously, assuming this first phase goes through, the first hostages will be released just hours before Donald Trump, on the west front of the building right behind me, puts his hand on the Bible, becomes the 47th president of the United States and the next commander-in-chief. And this will then be him and his administration to see through and what happens there. He has vowed all hell to pay if the hostages don't come home. What would you tell the incoming commander-in-chief?
Well, this is reminiscent of the Reagan-Carter situation with the hostages that Iran was holding at the time. I think that the reports are saying that there's been good collaboration and cooperation between the Biden administration and the Trump administration. However, things have shifted in recent weeks because this deal was on the table a long time ago and Hamas refused it. So the things that have changed are as follows. First of all, the removal of Hezbollah. So first and foremost, the removal of the proxies in the region, specifically Hezbollah, which were the biggest defender and threat to Israel and defender of Hamas. Once they were eliminated, Hamas was left without any defense whatsoever. The second thing is the Trump administration, and Trump saying all hell will break loose is enough to move not just Hamas, but also Qatar and Egypt to put pressure on Hamas, which I'm assuming is what actually happened, because all hell breaks loose. We're not entirely sure what this means within the Middle East, within Gaza specifically, but we definitely know that it's possible to put more pressure on Qatar and Egypt. So that looks like that's what have happened. But again, we are praying for this to go through. We're waiting for this to go through. And nobody should believe a terrorist organization like Hamas. I need to see the hostages back home, and then we can actually celebrate.
Noah Tishby, always great to see you. Thanks for being back with us here on the Hill. Appreciate it, Noah.
Thank you.
You got it. Talk soon. All right, still to come here on the Hill. NewsNation takes a closer look at those drone sightings in the East Coast. Remember all the drones that were up there in the skies? What's been going on since? And how one airport is now reacting. Plus, our eyes continue to stay on Southern California, why some residents are defying evacuation orders and arming themselves. Our Brian Enton is live, and inauguration just 4 days away, but one of the most influential Democrats says she won't be there. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is the center of politics. You're watching The Hill, and we're back in 4 minutes. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. So what happened to those mysterious drones that were spotted all over the place, hovering in the skies? The sightings both captivated and concerned residents, law enforcement, and lawmakers on the East Coast back in November. The FAA, for example, imposed flight restrictions. Lawmakers got classified briefings. Witnesses described some of the drones to be roughly the size of vehicles. Several seen flying in restricted areas, including military bases and over the president-elect's golf course.
I'm going to give you a report on drones about one day into the administration, because I think it's ridiculous that they're not telling you about what's going on with the drone. They're over Bedminster a lot.
Well, it has been nearly 2 months since the first real big batch of sightings, I guess you could say, and still no answers. Our Laura Ingle is live in West Hampton, New York, where an airport now, Laura, has installed a new detection system there. What's that all about?
Hey, Blake, yeah, there is very much a lot of activity going on right now this week, the week before, here at the Francis Gorbeski Airport. We're in West Hampton, where officials here in Suffolk County have said, look, we've got a very serious situation here with so many people. There's been a lot of 911 calls in this area of people seeing things. And, of course, the flight operators here working the control tower here behind me are seeing it, too. And you mentioned it there. There are now new detection things that have been put into place, detection equipment, I should say, that have been put all over this airport. Let's take a look at some of the drone sightings that have happened that we've been talking about in the past, because just this month, authorities have reported multiple drone sightings that have raised serious questions about what is going on in the skies. And we're talking about really sensitive areas that have happened here at the airport, taxiways, runways, way too close for comfort for these guys. And so we have also some video we want to show you. This is exclusive new video to NewsNation. This is in a different area that we have our hands on. I don't know if we have it there, but we do have some new exclusive video to share with you that was given to us by a researcher in New Jersey. There it is, spotted in the sky, unexplained, flying low, no propulsion, no heat. That just happened this weekend. So as we take a look at what some other civilians have seen in the sky, definitely activity out here at this airport, and they definitely are looking for more answers on this case, and we'll bring you more tomorrow as well. Blake?
All right, Laura Ingle, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Joining me now is Leroy Chow. He's a former International Space Station commander, NASA astronaut. He's also a pilot. We'll stick with the International Space Station commander for the label. He's had his own interactions with drones in the skies. Been on the show several times with us once again here on the Hill. Great to see you as always, Leroy.
Yeah, good to be with you. Good to see you too.
Yeah, thanks for being back. So Donald Trump says, I'm going to give you a report on day one about what's going on. What do you think we're going to learn whenever that comes?
You know, it's hard to say. I as you mentioned, I had my own observation up close and personal back in August. Two spherical, mirror polished orbs passed right underneath my private airplane. And, I'm at a loss to explain what it is. Maybe it's a secret military program using some kind of advanced technology that none of us are aware of. Or maybe it's something else. So, but, I think...
Do you think that's most likely the case?
The president-elect at his word. He's going to tell us what he knows or what he finds out when he takes office again.
So you had your own experience, right? And it strikes me that even someone like yourself doesn't really know how to describe it or classify it. But what do you think the most likely outcome here is?
I think the most likely outcome is it's some kind of, what I saw was probably some kind of military program because it was in the panhandle of Texas, wasn't on the coast. These drone sightings on the coast, it's hard to say. I mean, it could be, again, some kind of military thing. It's interesting that when the initial wave of sightings came out just before the holidays, and then the FAA, put all these temporary flight restrictions over these airports in sensitive areas, the activity dropped off dramatically, and now they're picking back up. So that suggests maybe those drones are hobbyists, although if you've got a fleet of, car-sized drones, I mean, that's a pretty expensive, elaborate thing to do, as a prank, right?
Why, Leroy, let me leave you with this. Why do you think we didn't get any answers? And knocking them up until this point.
I don't know. I mean, the Biden administration has been somewhat secretive on more than one occasion, so maybe it's just how they are. But I don't see any reason to keep this quiet or keep it suppressed because people are just going to speculate like they're doing, and that doesn't do anyone any good.
Leroy Chow knows a thing or two about objects in the skies. He's been to space and on the space station. Thanks for being back with us here on the Hill. Always great to see you, Leroy. I appreciate it.
You bet. My pleasure.
You got it. All right. Still much more to come here on the Hill. We are live on the other side of the break with Brian Entin in Southern California and the many issues that are taking place there, including what's going on with looters. Plus, FEMA getting criticized for its response. There are calls to oust the head of the agency. One of the former heads of FEMA joins me live and a live look at Capitol Hill, where, believe it or not, some staffers say, you know what? I know you give me your tax dollars, and you know what I should do in return? I should work 32 hours. Are you kidding me? When we're back. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. Trump's main money man testifies. Marco Rubio's Senate replacement is named, and why there's now ambassadors to Hollywood. Our Kelly Meyer is here with what's happening in the Capitol and more. Hello, Kelly.
A lot happening today, Blake. Another day, another round of questions for Trump's cabinet picks. Today's Trump's choice for Treasury Secretary Scott Bassett, grilled by members of the Senate Finance Committee. Bassett is promising to usher in a new and so-called, quote, economic golden age. Other hearings also happening include former North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum for Interior Secretary, NFL veteran Scott Turner to lead housing and urban development, and former Congressman Lee Zeldin to head to the Environmental Protection Agency. Yesterday, Trump's Secretary of State nominee, Florida Senator Marco Rubio, sat through a hearing, and today we learned who's going to fill his Senate seat. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis naming his state's Attorney General Ashley Moody to be Rubio's replacement. Trump also made some appointments of his own today, announcing actors Jon Voight, Mel Gibson, and Sylvester Stallone will serve as ambassadors to Hollywood. Trump saying it's for the, quote, purpose of bringing Hollywood, which has lost much business over the last 4 years to foreign countries, back bigger, better, and stronger than ever before. And that's what's happening on the Hill, Blake.
If Meyer gets to be an ambassador, where are you picking?
So I was going to say ambassador to Australia so I could be closer to my niece and nephew, but then I wouldn't be able to be here with you. So
oh, come on.
I don't know.
That's not a real answer, Kelly.
I was just sucking up a little bit, you know.
I'll take that.
What about you?
I'd be, if we're doing now new ambassador posts,
yeah,
I'd be the ambassador to Augusta National.
Oh.
That's what I would want. That's the gig. That's the speech.
I love it.
Kelly Meyer, thank you.
Thanks.
Please be assured that our firefighters continue to work 24/7 to achieve full containment of these wildfires as fast as we can.
Working around the clock, but nowhere near fully contained. A bit of hope, though, tonight, as easing winds and cooler temperatures are working in the favor of firefighters. Right now, as we know it, the Palisades fire, 22% contained. The Eaton fire, 55% contained. And the Auto fire, 85%. The Hearst fire basically entirely contained. The wildfires, though, not the only battle that residents and officials are fighting. Looters continue to target and burglarize evacuated homes. Residents disobeying evacuation orders to protect their homes. Our Brian Entin in Altadena, California with the latest. Brian, of course, the big issue there is the wildfires and getting that contained, but we see this time and again with natural disasters. That's where it begins, and then there's a lot more after that.
Yeah, for sure, Blake. It's interesting when you say containment, by the way. I learned that doesn't mean those are the areas where the fire's out. The fire could be totally out, but they don't consider it contained until they go over it every single acre themselves and what they call mop it up. So the numbers can be a little deceiving. We're here in Altadena, though. They've still got these areas totally closed. National Guard behind me, several checkpoints you have to go through. And there's this group of people here that stayed. They're calling themselves stayers. That's the term, stayers. They're on every block. And they're protecting the neighborhood, they say. They've got their own guns that they use for protection, and they go in neighbors' houses and make sure no one's looting around or bothering anyone, and they've sort of taken on this responsibility. We talked to one of them. Take a listen.
And your sign, if you are looting, we are shooting.
Well, it's a bit of a joke, but it's to remind someone, please don't just steal my freaking Starlink. You know, that would be kind of dumb.
But you are armed.
Yes. But I know what the laws are as well, you know, and I'm trying to make sure I'm always legal with my firearm control.
It's interesting. Everybody's just sort of helping each other out, the ones that stayed behind. If they leave, they can't get back through the checkpoint, so they've decided to stay. People go to different people's houses to shower and share food, and there's a real sort of sense of community with these stayers, as they call themselves, Blake.
Our Brian Enton out there in Altadena tonight. Brian, thank you. So as law enforcement and firefighters have their big challenges in L.A., here in Washington, FEMA is coming under scrutiny. The congresswoman who represents Altadena, where Brian was just reporting from, telling me earlier this week that many of her constituents' claims aren't being processed. And on the other side of the country, the congressman who represents battered Asheville, North Carolina, going much further than that.
There's nothing worse after your life has been devastated, you're not at your home, you're trying to recover, and then you get a non-approval message in error. That's not right.
That is an organization that clearly needs to be overhauled, and I'm anxious to be a part of that after January 20th. We need a new director, a new administrator, and we've got to change the culture of FEMA. There's too much government bureaucracy.
Joining me now is the former FEMA director, Michael Brown. He led the agency for 2.5 years, faced his own questions for how Hurricane Katrina was handled. Michael, thanks for being with us tonight here on the Hill. You know what it's like, sir, to face criticism. It is a very tough job, and you dealt with it 20 years ago in a much different circumstance. But here we are 20 years later, and we're still hearing a lot of these stories. Why?
I told you so, and I'm going to tell you again. It's amazing to me that when we created the Department of Homeland Security in 2003, I sent a memo to the White House and also to Secretary Ridge at the time that said folding FEMA into DHS and doing it the way they're doing it is going to cause, and at the time I was referencing Hurricane Andrew, which really pretty much destroyed the George H.W. Bush administration.
Yeah, I lived
And
through
I said, we're going to face that same kind of thing again. And so FEMA has been subsumed by this huge bureaucracy. So I'm not trying to defend the FEMA administrator, but I can tell you that what's going on is she's fighting a bureaucracy around her that just does not give her the resources or the flexibility to do what you need to do.
So, Michael, let me ask you, because Jared Moskowitz, a congressman from the South Florida area, was the first Democrat to say, you know what, I want to be a part of the Doge caucus. And one of his recommendations is exactly what you just laid out, which is that FEMA should be pulled away from the Department of Homeland Security and report, he says, he believes, directly to the White House. Is this a Doge undertaking, potentially, as you see it?
It's not a Doge undertaking. It's a congressional undertaking. Look, under the original Stafford Act, when I was the undersecretary and the director, originally I reported directly to the president, so that when something was going on that I needed help with, or I needed the bureaucracy cut through or whatever, if I needed DOD to do something, I could reach out directly to the Secretary of Defense. I could reach out directly to the president, and did on many occasions. But then after 2003, 2005, you get subsumed into DHS, and now you have a bureaucracy on top of a bureaucracy. There's a great Cato study out from, maybe a decade ago, about all of these things that I was saying back in 2003. Cato now reports, and now I'm very glad to hear that some congressmen are beginning to think, yeah, maybe this was a mistake. The smartest thing they could do is to pull FEMA out, give it back its independent agency status, and give the director direct access to the president. If you don't have direct access to the president like I had, it's not going to work.
Michael Brown was the former head of FEMA. Fascinating to hear your perspective, sir. Thanks for being with us tonight here on the Hill. Appreciate it. You got it.
You bet.
All right. Now, there is a debate that is now playing out here in Washington of whether or not conditions should be attached to federal aid, as Republicans have concerns now with how Democrats in California prepared their state. You are among the group of Republicans that are making the case that any aid should be paid for. Explain why. Why is that your position, Senator?
Because we're $36.3 trillion in debt. We've gone from $4.4 trillion in spending in 2019 to averaging $6.5 over the last 5 years, and now we're spending $7 trillion. And most people in Congress don't even realize that total amount.
Ron Johnson, Senator from Wisconsin, here on the Hill last night. Back with me now, Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House Chief of Staff. Mick, the reason why I wanted to discuss this with you You said something fascinating to me last night as off camera, as this conversation is now starting to take place of should conditions be stipulated to aid. And the example that I used with the congressman is every single state along the Gulf of Mexico has a Republican governor and a Republican-controlled state house. And so what if you get in a situation where Democrats are in control and they say, well, we don't like how the Republicans handled things down there in that state. Yep. And, well, Trump's administration did this with California. And you told me that when you were being confirmed, you had this very conversation with...
I had a conversation, I never told this story before, I had a conversation with a senator from a blue state who was concerned that if there was ever a disaster in that state during a Republican administration, that the blue state would be treated differently. Okay. And I had the same concerns about red states going through a disaster with a Democrat in office. And we had talked about trying to set up rules that sort of set a standard, a metric, something objective in how you measure and pay out disaster money.
And now folks want to know who that senator was?
Kamala Harris. She'd only been there about a week. She's a brand new senator during my confirmation process.
Senator from California?
Senator from California.
What was that conversation like?
Fascinating. It really was. It's one of the things that, listen, I've no love lost between me and her as vice president. I thought she was a terrible candidate, but I was so excited about that possibility when she first came into the Senate. Of course, she got in she couldn't work with a Trump person after that because that's what Washington does to you. But that discussion is taking place in private in many of the offices in Washington, D.C. It's time to bring it out and have a public conversation.
So if you had that conversation privately with Kamala Harris and you're telling me more of that is happening privately, most likely, how does this end?
They're going to have to figure out a way to take the politics out. Politics, you can't take politics out of everything in Washington, D.C., but they have to figure out to have some objective metrics. How do you measure disaster? You can't just pick a number out of the air, which is what we do. You can't say, look, they're going to put conditions on this state, but not on that state. You have to have some uniform application. Has to be paid for. Ron Johnson is right. The days of just writing blank checks are gone. You're $36 trillion in debt. But have a system that you can sort of pull off the shelf and apply evenly every time.
Whether or not it's paid for and how is, of course, part of the debate, part of the conversation. We'll leave it there. Other side, don't go anywhere.
I'll sit right here.
Stay here. Other side of the break. President Biden delivering one final address before he leaves office. But what about the idea that this country could be heading toward an oligarchy? And how about this? Would you like to work 32 hours a week? Huh? Have you heard what some inside that building are now saying?
Don Jr., his son, very loyal to him, said, I have never in my entire life heard my father admit to a mistake. A big NewsNation special coming up. I will give you inside stuff you have never heard about the president.
All right, this just in. Following the 7th test flight of SpaceX's mega rocket, the spacecraft destroyed in midair, but they did catch the booster. The company posting the following, saying teams will continue to review data from today's flight test to better understand the root cause. With a test like this, success comes from what we learn, and today's flight will help us improve Starship's reliability.
Liftoff.
Just hours before, probably while you were sleeping overnight, Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin company, the rocket there, the first one taking off earlier today and having a successful flight. The SpaceX CEO, Elon Musk, congratulated Bezos on the accomplishment. You got to wonder what the White House thinks about it. As just last night, President Biden used his farewell address to bash extreme wealth.
Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead.
Now, that became a focus during the nomination hearing for President-elect Trump's Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, who got into this exchange with Senator Bernie Sanders.
Do you think that when so few people have so much wealth and so much economic and political power, that is an oligarchic form of society?
Well, I would note that President Biden gave the Presidential Medal of Freedom to two people who I think would qualify for his oligarchs.
All right, full panel here with me now. Mick Mulvaney back again. Denise Gitsom, former aide in the George W. Bush White House. Lori Watkins, former policy advisor to President Obama. And Adam Hodge, former communications director for the DNC. Hello to you all. Thanks for being here. Nice to see everyone.
See you.
The oligarchy line. Adam, last night. Is that sort of is that really the outgoing message there for Joe Biden?
No, the outgoing message from his speech last night was actually one about liberty. He spent the whole speech talking about how we as a country, founded on the idea of liberty, out of many we are one. But the problem is, with extreme wealth concentration in America, there's a question about whether we actually have an equal opportunity economy in the country.
But that's what sticks, though, right?
Yeah, it sticks because there's no question that there's a tremendous wealth concentration. The St. Louis Fed this year said that 10% of Americans control 67% of the wealth in America. That's not something that I think we aspire to as a country. Many of Trump's own voters have talked about their concern about the power of the elites and the wealthy having too much control in society. So this is a bipartisan concern.
Not aspire to?
Well, most of whom give to the Democratic Party. Let's be honest, the Democrats have always been better at raising money from these big money people. Joe Biden has been to Davos no less than 9 times to talk to the wealthiest people in the world. There's nobody on any side of the aisle that can argue that every politician goes after those oligarchs, and until they're not on their side, they're for them. They're doing their bidding, they're taking their money. That is how Washington is run. That's the bigger question, not a matter of, that's the bigger issue with Washington, why Americans don't believe in Washington anymore.
Sort of to Adam's point, can I say, well, this wealth concentration happened under Biden. The 100 wealthiest Americans are now $1.5 trillion richer. The top 0.1%, Lori, gained more than $6 trillion over the last 4 years.
Well, I would disagree with that because I think a lot of
those are the
Trump
numbers,
tax cuts caused some of these business owners to have some of the growth that they've had. Also, the pandemic was a way for a lot of them to capitalize off that. But what Adam was saying, this concentration of power, when you have wealth, power, and influence, and also an erosion of freedom of the press, yeah, that's authoritarianism. That is oligarchy type behavior, a governmental type, not democratic.
In the election.
It doesn't mean it's wrong, though.
It doesn't, exactly.
Well, then stop taking their money. I mean, it's so easy. Just stop taking their money. If you have a problem with it, then you stop by stopping taking their money.
Talk about parties.
I don't think people care that much about wealth concentration. I think they care about 2 things, which is their standard of living. Is it going up? They don't care about somebody else as long as they feel like they're doing okay. And they care about whether or not they and their kids can move up. It's that social mobility that worries me. If you are creating a permanent landed sort of gentry class, that would be a problem. But all the people we're talking about who are super wealthy were born poor for the most part. Now, the Walmart family is different, but Jeff Bezos didn't have any money when he was born. Elon Musk didn't have a lot of money when he was born. We still have some of that. These are new wealthy people, and that's still healthy.
There's a difference, though, between, everybody should applaud people who have the wealth and who acquire it through working hard and making a good living. The question is, what happens after you've amassed that wealth? Do we have a fair system in the economy where the taxes are fair for?
Do we have the Jeff Bezos soundbite? Because Bezos basically addressed that in the Deal Book interview that he gave Adam. In which, do we have it, Mark, or no? Play it.
Amazon's market cap is $2.3 trillion today. I own about 200 billion-ish of it. So if you take 2.3 billion and subtract out the piece I kept from myself, then I've created something like 2.1 trillion of wealth for other people.
Mm-hmm. Is he wrong there?
No, there's no question that Amazon has created a tremendous amount of wealth. The question is, do we have a system that emboldens and empowers people to pay their fair share? And you look at what Joe Biden said last night. He talked about having a fair economy where people pay their fair share. We do not have that today.
10% of Americans pay 90% of the taxes in America. So you tell me what's fair.
No, let me move on from there. Mm-hmm. Do you think this is fair? And do you think Bezos and Musk got ahead by working just 32 hours a week? Well, a group of government workers, employees, known as the Congressional Progressive Staff Association, sending a letter to leaders from both parties, quote, "We propose implementing a 32-hour work week for D.C.-based staff during district work periods and a 32-hour work week for district-based staff while in session." The New York Congressman, Democrat Rich Torres, reacted in part saying, "Why not be bold and ask for a 0-hour work week? I wonder how blue-collar Americans would feel about white-collar workers demanding a 32-hour work week."
I'm so glad you turned towards me, Blake. Look, I myself, you might not even know this, but I myself experienced burnout working for Barack Obama. I wrote a national best-selling book called Go From Stress to Strong about my experience there, right? And so, of course, I'm going to support better workplace balance, etc. But perception is everything in politics, and timing is everything. And if you want as a former Hill staffer myself, if you want a 32-hour work week, Congress is not the place for you. And that's really all that I have to say about that.
I mean, what happened to public service and like this entitled mentality that the world has to conform to my needs when I come here to serve our country? Can you imagine if the military was like, you know what, let me just fight the wars that I feel like. It's insane.
It's taxpayer dollars.
Right.
Folks who work.
It's giving me a raise.
Yeah, 84% of the country works 5 days a week. 6% works 11% of the week. There's 5.3 million people in this country working multiple jobs.
It's so entitled.
I think this is absurd. Like, to be clear, right? I mean, and the thing that popped in my head first is the quote from Billie Jean King: "Pressure's a privilege."
Yeah,
these jobs are a privilege. My time working in the National Security Council in the White House was a huge privilege, and I worked like much more than
32 times 3.
And you loved it. And you absolutely
totally.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why we're willing to work the hours.
Because you're part of.
If you don't like it, this is not the job for you. It's a great point.
We'll leave it there. Thank y'all. Appreciate it. It is a who's who, by the way. Speaking of money, of tech billionaires attending the inauguration on Monday. So, what's in it for them? Leland Vitter, other side of the break. All right, welcome back on NewsNation. The inauguration of Donald J. Trump live from D.C. with NewsNation Politics powered by The Hill. On Monday, don't you know, I will be hosting part of Inauguration Day coverage starting at 9 o'clock at 8 a.m. Central. Some of the biggest names in tech, by the way, will be in attendance. Elon Musk will be sitting alongside the Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, the Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg, and others. Leland Vitter, host of On Balance, joins me now. I know there's going to be a lot of focus on those folks, but I always like to see in the hour before that wide shot where they're all sitting there and you see who's who and who's talking to who and all the uncomfortable moments.
We got that moment right with Obama and Trump at the Carter funeral. Like, hey.
Remember the meme with Bernie Sanders back in the inauguration 8 years ago?
It's when really you don't need anchors, you need lip readers.
Exactly. Bill O'Reilly coming up on the show.
Yeah, really interesting reporting on what the first day